The gamble begins. The market was alive with colors, sounds, and smells. A place where aliens from many worlds gathered to trade, argue, and gossip. Humans were rare here, but one man walked through the busy streets without fear. His name was Daniel, and people whispered when they saw him. They knew he was reckless, bold, and always ready to gamble with anything. Even his life today, Daniel stopped in front of a small, shadowed stall. It looked empty at first, but inside sat a woman covered in a long cloak. Her face was hidden, her hands thin, her movements slow. Most who passed by never looked at her twice, and those who did quickly looked away. Whispers followed her wherever she went. "She is cursed," someone muttered. "She is a widow of the fallen general," another hissed. "She carries death wherever she goes," a third voice added. But Daniel did not walk away. Instead, he stepped closer. His eyes sharp, his smile calm. He liked risks. And something about this woman drew him in. The widow slowly lifted her head, and for the first time he saw her eyes. They were tired, sad, and yet deep with something else. Something like fire waiting to burn again. "You should leave," she said softly, her voice almost broken. "No one helps me, no one stands with me, and no one dares to take my side." Her words were heavy, almost like a warning. But Daniel only leaned on the stall's frame and smirked. "What if I do?" He asked her, "What if I gamble on you?" The crowd around them froze. Aliens turned their heads. Traders stopped shouting. Even the air seemed to grow still. A human standing with her. It was madness, some laughed. Some shook their heads, others spat on the ground. "You do not know what she hides," a merchant shouted. "She will drag you into ruin," another said. "Walk away, human, before you are marked like her," an elder warned. But Daniel did not walk away. Instead, he sat down on the bench near her stall as if nothing could touch him. "I've gambled with worse odds," he said calmly. "Maybe you are dangerous, maybe you are not. But I'll take the risk." The widow lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They want me erased, they want me forgotten, and anyone near me suffers the same fate." Her voice carried pain, deep and heavy, like someone who had already lost everything. Daniel leaned closer, his tone serious now. "Then let them come, I don't scare easy." He placed a small silver coin on the table between them. "In my world we say every gamble starts with trust." "This is mine," the crowd gasped. The coin was no ordinary piece of metal. It was a symbol of human honor, something no human gave lightly. To give it to someone marked an outcast was more than reckless. It was rebellion. The widow stared at the coin, her breath unsteady. For years no one had offered her anything but fear and hatred. Now a human offered her trust. Slowly, her thin fingers reached out, touched the coin, and closed her hand over it. Her cloak shifted, and for a brief moment, Daniel saw something under the fabric, a faint glow. Like hidden light pressed close to her chest, he blinked, but before he could ask, she pulled her cloak tighter, hiding it again. "You don't know what you've just chosen," she said at last, her eyes locked on his. And in them he saw not only sorrow but also a secret waiting to be revealed. The kind of secret that could change more than one life. It could shake entire worlds. Around them the whispers grew louder. "The human is mad. He will die like the rest, or maybe the curse will spread." But Daniel ignored the voices. He stood, offered his hand to her, and spoke clearly for all to hear. "Whatever you hide, I'll see it through. That's my gamble." The widow hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. It was cold, fragile, but strong in a way that surprised him, and as their hands touched, the market seemed to hold its breath. Even the sky above felt heavier, darker, as if the universe itself was watching. Daniel smiled again, not knowing that this simple choice, this reckless gamble, would not only change his fate, it would turn the entire galaxy upside down. The widow leaned close, her voice just a whisper. "Then walk with me, human, and pray you are ready for what comes next." And together, they stepped away from the stall. The crowd parted in silence, no one dared to stop them. But in the shadows, unseen eyes followed, eyes that had waited for years, eyes that would not let her rise again without blood. The gamble had begun, and the first card was already on the table. The widow's secret. Daniel followed the widow through winding streets, leaving behind the noise of the market. The further they walked, the quieter it became, until only the sound of their footsteps echoed against the stone walls. She moved quickly despite her thin frame, her cloak sweeping behind her, her head lowered. Daniel stayed close, his instincts sharp, his eyes scanning the shadows. He knew when people watched him, and right now, unseen eyes burned holes in his back. The widow finally stopped at the edge of the city where ruined buildings leaned like broken teeth. Smoke from half-dead fires drifted in the air. This part of the city was abandoned, forgotten. Even the poorest traders refused to live here. Why here? Daniel asked, his voice low. The widow lifted her hood back slightly, revealing part of her face. A scar traced her cheek, pale against her skin, a mark of violence she had survived. "This is the only place they do not follow," she said quietly. "Even fear has limits." She led him into a collapsed house, its roof half gone, its floor covered in dust and shattered glass. Daniel stepped over the wreckage and his eyes caught the faint glow again. Hidden beneath her cloak, whatever that is, "You're guarding it like your life depends on it," he said. The widow turned, her eyes hard now, her voice carrying weight. "It does," she answered. "This is the reason they call me cursed, the reason they want me gone." Slowly, she pulled the cloak aside. In her hands lay a small object wrapped in silver cloth. When she unwrapped it, light spilled into the room, golden and alive. Daniel blinked as symbols etched in alien script swirled across the surface, moving like water. It wasn't just metal, it wasn't just technology, it was alive. Daniel took a cautious step closer. "What is it?" The widow looked down at the object, her voice trembling but steady. "It was my husband's final gift, his greatest creation and his greatest crime." Daniel frowned. "Your husband? The general they whisper about?" She nodded, tears flashing in her eyes. "He built weapons the galaxy had never seen, weapons that could destroy worlds, but he also built this, something different." She placed the glowing artifact on the ground, and the dust around it rose as if gravity bent to its will. The air thickened, humming with unseen power. "It holds the key to a fleet hidden in the dark of space," she whispered. "A fleet they thought was destroyed when my husband fell, but it still sleeps, waiting for this." Her hands tightened on the artifact. "They believe if I live, if I rise again, I will awaken it." Daniel stared, his heart racing. A hidden fleet, a sleeping weapon, a widow hunted because of what she carried. It was more than a gamble now. It was stepping into a storm that could tear galaxies apart. "You could rule with this," Daniel said softly. Her head snapped up, her eyes burning with grief. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "I do not want to rule, I only want to survive. I only want the truth remembered, my husband's name restored, and my people free." Daniel studied her, his instincts torn between caution and curiosity. There was no lie in her words, only pain, but the artifact, it was dangerous, too powerful to ignore, and already he knew enemies were closing in. "Do they know you still have it?" Daniel asked. "They suspect," she admitted. "That is why they send hunters, assassins, spies, all to keep me silenced, all to make sure this never rises again." Before Daniel could reply, a sudden noise cut through the ruins, a stone shifted outside, a shadow passed across the doorway. The widow froze, clutching the artifact to her chest. "They followed us," she whispered. Daniel pulled a small blade from his belt, his gambler's smile gone. "Then they'll regret it," he said. But deep inside he knew this was no ordinary fight. This was the start of something much larger. The widow set the artifact down again, pressing her palm against its glowing surface. Symbols flared brighter and the air around them shimmered. Daniel felt the ground vibrate beneath his boots. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Calling for protection," she said. Her voice steady now. The light spread across the floor in a circle, symbols burning like fire. Daniel's eyes widened as shadows at the doorway pulled back, their owners whispering in fear. The artifact was not only a key, it was a warning. The widow stood tall now, her cloak falling open, her scarred face revealed, her voice strong. "You see now why they call me cursed," she said. "Because what I carry can burn down the lies they built, and raise what they fear most." Daniel looked at her, then at the glowing artifact, then back to the shadows retreating into the night. For the first time, he felt the weight of his gamble pressing on his chest. This was no small risk. This was a choice that could shift the balance of power across stars. But instead of walking away, he laughed softly under his breath. "You know," he said, "I've played cards all my life, but this is the highest stakes table I've ever sat at." The widow's eyes softened just a little. "Then play carefully. Human," she whispered. "Because in this game, losing does not mean death for one man. It means fire for entire worlds." Outside, the whispers of hunters carried into the night, promising blood and silence. Inside, the glow of the artifact painted the ruined walls with golden light. And in that moment, Daniel knew the secret he had uncovered was not just hers. It was now his burden too. The widow lowered her voice, her final words hanging heavy in the air. You gambled on me, Daniel. Now the galaxy will gamble on you. Enemies in the dark. The night was heavy. The ruins colder than stone. Daniel stood with his blade ready, the widow clutching the glowing artifact close. Outside, whispers moved through the dark. Not the whispers of wind, but of living things waiting. Hunting, Daniel could feel them. Eyes sharp. Hearts eager. Hands ready to kill. They are here for me, the widow said, her voice calm but tight. They will not stop. Not until I am ash and silence, Daniel smirked, though his grip on the blade tightened. Well, they'll find I'm not so easy to silence. A shadow slipped inside. Moving low across the broken floor, another followed, silent as smoke. The hunters wore armor black as night, their faces hidden by masks with glowing red eyes. They carried curved blades and long rifles, weapons meant to kill quickly and leave nothing behind. One hunter hissed, "Hand her over, human, and maybe your death will be quick." Daniel chuckled softly, his gambler's smile flashing. See, I don't like the word maybe, he replied in a blur. He threw a broken piece of glass at the voice. It struck the mask, shattering the red glow, and the hunter staggered back with a hiss of pain. The fight began. Blades clashed in the ruin, sparks flying, dust rising. Daniel fought with speed, his movements sharp, practiced. He wasn't a soldier, but he had survived too many alleys, too many bets gone wrong, and tonight, survival was all that mattered. The widow stood behind him at first, clutching the artifact, her face pale but her eyes burning. But then something shifted, her scars glowed faintly. Her veins lit with the same golden light as the artifact. Daniel caught a glimpse of her in the corner of his eye, and for a heartbeat he almost faltered. She was not just a widow hiding from the galaxy. There was power in her blood, something living, something feared. A hunter lunged, blade aimed for Daniel's throat, but before Daniel could react, the widow raised her hand. Golden light burst from her palm, striking the hunter and throwing him across the room. The wall cracked with the force. Dust raining down, the hunters froze, fear flickering in their eyes. This is why they call her cursed, one whispered. Voice trembling, she carries his legacy. Daniel turned to her, his voice sharp with shock. You never said it was in you. Her face was fierce now, her cloak falling back, revealing the glow under her skin. It is not just in me, she said. I am the key. My husband built it that way. He knew they would try to steal his work, so he bound it to my blood. The hunters regrouped, rage replacing fear. If she awakens the fleet, the galaxy burns, one snarled. Kill them both. The ruin exploded into chaos again. Daniel fought two at once, blades ringing, his breath sharp, his body burning with effort. But each time a blade came too close, the widow raised her hand and light tore through the dark. She was no longer fragile, no longer hidden. She was fire wrapped in broken flesh, yet the power cost her. Daniel saw it. Her knees shaking, sweat shining on her skin. Her breath ragged, she was strong. But she was breaking herself open to wield that light. Daniel stepped in front of her again, blade raised. You don't have to fight alone, he shouted. Together they pushed back, his steel and her light striking in rhythm. One hunter fell, another screamed, the rest pulled back into the shadows. But Daniel knew they were not gone, only waiting. Hunters never retreated without reason. Something worse was coming. The widow knelt, clutching the artifact again, her voice low, urgent. They will not stop now. Not after what they've seen. Daniel crouched beside her, his blade still wet with blood. Then let them come. We'll keep playing, he said, his gambler's grin returning, but inside, even he felt the weight of this gamble growing heavier. The artifact pulsed, golden light filling the ruin like a heartbeat. Daniel could feel it now, not just see it. Power. Deep and endless, it hummed in his bones, whispered in his mind. It wasn't just a key to a fleet. It was a voice calling from the dark of space. The widow looked at him, her eyes fierce but afraid. They will send more, she said, not just hunters. Commanders, armies, entire worlds if they must. Daniel stared into the golden light, his smile fading into something harder. Then let them bet everything, he said. Because I don't fold. Outside, the night howled with distant engines. The sound of ships descending, the hunters had not come alone. They were only the first wave inside the ruin. Daniel and the widow stood shoulder to shoulder. Between them, the artifact pulsed. Alive and above them, unseen in the dark sky, something stirred in response. A whisper from the stars. A promise that the galaxy's balance was about to break. The hunters thought they were chasing a widow and a reckless human, but in truth, they had just lit the first fire of a war waiting to begin. The revelation. The ruined house shook as engines roared above. Dust rained from the broken ceiling, and Daniel looked up, his blade still in his hand. The hunters had vanished into the night, but their retreat meant only one thing. Stronger forces were coming. The widow pressed the artifact against her chest, her skin glowing faintly with its golden light. Her breath was uneven, but her eyes were steady. "They have seen what I am," she said softly. "They will call the fleets now, and I cannot hide anymore." Daniel knelt beside her, trying to study her face. "You keep saying you're cursed, but all I see is someone who terrifies the wrong people." The widow gave a small, broken laugh, almost bitter. "You do not understand, human. They do not fear me. They fear what I can awaken." She unwrapped the artifact again, and this time she did not try to shield it. The glow filled the room, brighter than before, carving patterns of fire across the walls. Symbols rose from the surface, spinning slowly in the air. They were maps, star systems, routes, hidden points marked with precision. Daniel's eyes widened. This is a map," the widow nodded, her voice heavy. "A map to my husband's fleet. The one they swore was destroyed." She touched the symbols and they shifted. Aligning into a great circle, at the center was a single dark star, pulsing like a living heart. "That is where they wait," she whispered. "Ships built from the bones of dying worlds, hidden in silence for 20 years. Waiting for me." Daniel felt the air tighten around him, a sleeping fleet untouched, ready, something that could change everything in the galaxy. "You mean to say you can wake them?" he asked. Her eyes glistened with grief and fire. "I'm not just a widow, Daniel," she said. "I was his bond, his key, his safeguard. When he fell, he bound his greatest secret to me. My blood is the only voice that can call them back." Daniel stepped back, his chest heavy with the truth. This was bigger than any gamble he had ever taken. He hadn't just placed a coin of trust in her hands. He had placed himself at the center of a storm that could split the galaxy in two. The widow stood taller now, her fear melting into strength. For years she had been bent low, hiding under rags and shadows. But here, in the glow of the artifact, she seemed like something reborn. Her scars caught the light like marks of honor, not shame. She was no longer a beggar in the ruins. She was a queen waiting to rise. Daniel saw it too, and for a long moment he simply stared. "You're not cursed," he said quietly. "You're dangerous. To the wrong kind of people." A loud crash shook the air as a ship landed outside. The ground trembled. Voices barked in alien tongues, weapons clattered. The hunters had returned with soldiers, armored and ready. The widow placed the artifact on the ground, her fingers steady. "If they take me now, they will erase the last memory of my people. If they kill me, the fleet dies in the dark forever." Daniel looked at the soldiers swarming outside, then back at her. "You think I'll just let them take you?" he asked with a grin. The widow met his eyes, her voice steady. "Why would you risk your life for mine?" Daniel tightened his grip on his blade. "Because I've already gambled and I don't walk away from the table halfway through." The widow's lips trembled, but then she touched the artifact again. Light erupted, shaking the very air. Above them, the night sky cracked with a thunderous boom. Stars seemed to shift, and for a heartbeat, the galaxy itself felt alive. Daniel shielded his eyes as beams of golden light shot upward. High above, beyond sight, something answered deep in the void. Engines older than empires stirred awake. Ships the size of mountains groaned as they rose from their long sleep. A fleet no one believed still existed was opening its eyes again. The soldiers outside froze, their weapons clattering. Even the hunters dropped to their knees. Fear written across their faces, they had come to kill a widow, but they were witnessing the rise of a legend. The widow's voice carried like thunder, her scars glowing, her eyes burning golden. "For years, you called me cursed, broken, forgotten," she declared. "But hear me now, my husband's fire is not gone. His legacy is not ash. Through me, it lives again." Daniel stared. His chest pounding, he had gambled on a widow. But what stood before him was not just a widow. She was a queen, the bearer of a weapon too great for the galaxy to contain. The soldiers broke, running into the night. Only the hunters remained, whispering in horror. "She has awakened it," one muttered. "She has called the fleet The widow turned to Daniel, her eyes softer now, her voice low. This is why they fear me. This is why they would see me starve in silence, because I am not just one woman. I am the voice of 1,000 warships. Daniel stepped closer, his face lit by the glow of the artifact. And now? He asked. The widow looked toward the sky, where unseen ships stirred like giants in the dark. Now, she said, the galaxy will learn that the widow they cast aside has returned, and with her, the fire they thought they buried. The upside-down galaxy. The ground trembled as the sky split with golden light. From far above, deep in the dark between stars, 1,000 voices seemed to wake. Engines older than kingdoms stirred. Warships the size of floating cities began to rise. The galaxy had forgotten them, but the widow's call had broken their sleep. Daniel stood at the widow's side, blade still in his hand. Though it seemed small now compared to what was happening in the heavens, his gamble had begun with a coin of trust, but now it had turned into something greater. A gamble against empires, against history, against fear itself. The soldiers who had surrounded the ruins fell to their knees, terror in their eyes. Some ran, some begged, some simply froze, staring up at the sky as if they were watching the end of the world. The hunters who once hissed of curses and silence now whispered prayers. She has awakened them, one said, his mask trembling. The galaxy will burn, another muttered, but his voice was weak. Afraid, the widow stood tall, her cloak thrown aside, her scars glowing like molten gold. She was no longer a broken figure hiding in the shadows. She was power reborn, the voice of a forgotten fleet. She raised the artifact high, and the sky answered with a roar that shook stone and bone alike. Daniel watched her, his chest tight. He had gambled many times in his life, on cards, on fights, on chances, but never like this. And as he looked at her, he realized this was the first gamble he didn't want to win alone. This was not just her fight, it was his too. The widow turned to him, her voice steady. Do you see now why they fear me? Why they let me starve in silence? Daniel smirked, though his eyes were sharp. I see it. But fear isn't what I feel, he said. I see a queen they couldn't bury, and a galaxy about to regret underestimating one widow and one human. Above, the first shadow of the fleet broke through the clouds. A ship vast as a mountain, its hull scarred but unbroken. It drifted like a ghost of war, its engines glowing with the same golden fire as the artifact. More followed, hundreds, their shapes blotting out the stars. The galaxy had turned upside down, and it was only the beginning. The widow lowered the artifact, her breath uneven. Her strength was not endless, but her will was iron. The choice is made, she whispered. They will come now. Not just hunters, not just soldiers, empires will rise against me. Daniel tightened his grip on his blade, though it looked useless compared to a fleet. Let them rise, he said, his gambler's grin flashing. I'll stand beside you until the last card falls. Suddenly, a voice boomed across the night, amplified by alien speakers outside. It was cold, commanding, dripping with arrogance. Widow of the fallen general, it called. You dare awaken what should have remained buried? Surrender now, or watch entire worlds burn for your pride. The widow stepped forward, her eyes blazing, her voice louder than his. For years you chained me in silence, called me cursed, tried to erase his name. But hear me now, my pride is not my own, it belongs to my people, and I will not surrender. The soldiers outside fell back in fear. The voice broke into curses. The fleets in orbit stirred, engines flaring, weapons arming. The war they feared was now alive. Daniel looked at the sky, then at the widow, and shook his head with a laugh. You know, I never thought one coin would flip the whole galaxy on its head. The widow's lips curved into the faintest smile. Sometimes the smallest gamble is the one that decides everything. Together they stepped out of the ruins, the artifact glowing between them. The city around them was silent, its people watching from shadows. Aliens who once spat at the widow now stared in awe. Some whispered her name, others bowed their heads. She was no longer a ghost to be feared. She was a flame to be followed. The sky burned with golden light as the fleet hung above, waiting for her command. Daniel stood beside her, his heart pounding. This was no longer just her secret. It was their fight, their gamble, their destiny. And as the galaxy turned upside down, one truth became clear. A human's reckless gamble on a starving widow had awakened a storm that would sweep across stars. Empires would fall, thrones would shake, and legends would be rewritten. Because in the end, one human believed where no one else dared. The widow raised her hand, her voice steady. Then let the galaxy remember. The cursed widow is no longer alone, the fleet answered with thunder. And the galaxy trembled at the dawn of fire.